Could you have become Einstein, Newton, Tesla? Most people would say no. They believe genius is something you're born with. But science tells a more complicated story. Your brain can physically change in response to what you repeatedly do. So the real question may not be whether you were born a genius. It may be how much of your intelligence you can still build. To understand why, we need to look inside Einstein's brain. In 1955, when Albert Einstein died, a pathologist named Thomas Harvey removed his brain and preserved it in formaldehyde. For decades, it sat in jars, waiting for someone to study it properly. In the 1980s, a neuroscientist named Marion Diamond finally examined small samples of that tissue. What did she find? Not more neurons, not a bigger brain. Einstein's brain wasn't unusually large. Its overall size was within the normal range. What Diamond found instead was a higher ratio of glial cells, the support cells that feed and maintain neurons, particularly in regions tied to abstract thought. Here's the part worth being careful about. The difference didn't reveal a single genius cell. And scientists couldn't tell whether it was a cause of Einstein's abilities, a result of how he used his brain for decades, or some combination of both. What they could say is this: the brain isn't fixed at birth. Experience and long-term learning can physically reshape its structure and function, much like a trail through a forest grows deeper the more it's walked. That idea sounds nice. But is there proof this actually builds ability in ordinary people, not just Einstein? In 1993, a psychologist named K. Anders Ericsson studied violin students at a music academy in Berlin. He split them into 3 groups: future teachers, good performers, and elite world-class musicians destined for international careers. He wasn't trying to determine who was naturally talented. He was looking at how their practice histories differed, specifically hours of what he called deliberate practice, working at the edge of your ability, identifying mistakes, and getting feedback that helps you improve. By age 20, the elite group had logged around 10,000 hours of that kind of practice. The good performers, about 8,000. The future teachers, roughly 4,000. The famous 10,000-hour number was never a guarantee of mastery. And it isn't a magic threshold anyone crosses into greatness. What the study actually revealed is narrower and more useful. Elite performers had accumulated years of structured, uncomfortable, deliberate work that the others simply hadn't. The difference wasn't that they never struggled. It was that they spent more years practicing in a way that forced them to confront what they couldn't do yet. History gives us the same pattern in a single life. Take Isaac Newton. The story you've heard is an apple, a flash of insight, gravity discovered in an afternoon under a tree. The real story is less romantic and far more useful to you. In 1665, the plague closed Cambridge University, and Newton retreated to his family's farm for nearly 2 years. He didn't sit around waiting for lightning to strike. He filled notebook after notebook with failed calculations. He taught himself optics by staring into a mirror at the sun until his eyes ached just to understand color. He spent years developing mathematical ideas that would later become part of calculus. The apple might be true, but it wasn't the moment gravity was discovered. It was one small spark sitting on top of years of obsessive, unglamorous, repetitive work. So why does the myth of the born genius survive when the evidence keeps pointing somewhere else? Because it's comforting. If genius is something you're born with, failure becomes easier to explain. You can admire greatness from a safe distance without ever having to risk discovering how far you could actually go. A psychologist named Carol Dweck spent decades studying exactly this pattern at Stanford. She found that people who believed their abilities were fixed traits tended to avoid challenges because failure felt like proof they were never good enough to begin with. But people who believed their abilities could grow through effort responded to failure completely differently. They leaned into it, treating a mistake not as a verdict on who they were, but as information about what to try next. In one of her studies, students who believed intelligence was fixed disengaged the moment puzzles got hard, some refusing to even look at their wrong answers. The students who believed intelligence could grow reacted with something closer to curiosity, because that's where the useful information was hiding. Now, before this turns into a simple, just work hard story, it's worth being honest about something. Effort doesn't erase biology. Not everyone starts from the same place. Genetics, environment, access to teachers, timing, and plain luck all shaped whether Newton ever saw a mathematics textbook, or whether Einstein had the time, education, and circumstances to keep pursuing physics. Practice alone doesn't guarantee greatness. But the brain is far less fixed than the myth of the born genius suggests. And that gap between fixed and flexible is bigger than most people ever test for themselves. The real question isn't whether you were born different. It's whether you're willing to stay in the uncomfortable room long enough to become different. On the ordinary days nobody is watching, doing the unglamorous work that never makes it into the story. You probably won't become Einstein or Newton or Tesla, but you may become far more capable than the myth of the born genius ever allowed you to imagine. And that possibility is worth testing.